Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Hi guys, Tom Scott. Let's go. Awesome channel. Preemptive like. The UK's last aerial ropeway uses no power, moves 300 tons a day, and will be gone by 2036. Gravity? Let's watch. I love these like engineering type videos. Did I say everything? Original link to the video top. Just hit all the buttons. Let's go.
The folks at this quarry in Clafton, near Lancaster, dig up about 60,000 tonnes of shale rock from the ground every year. That shale needs to get to the brickworks about 1.5 miles that way. Nowadays, you'd have some fancy underground conveyor belt, or you'd just have trucks loading up and driving back and forth. But this quarry opened in the 1920s, so the solution was a bit different, an aerial ropeway. This is the last aerial ropeway in Britain. It's nearly 100 years old. It needs no fuel and no electricity to run. And in 15 years' time, it'll be gone.
This ropeway was commissioned in the 1920s.
How does it go
We've
up?
been quarrying from this valley now for well over 150 years. An empty bucket arrives, it goes onto what we call the bull rail, so that automatically comes off the rope and it allows the rope to go around a wheel. The bucket then is dusted if the weather is bad. The rain adheres to the bucket and the muck sticks to it. So that would reduce what is taken down to the factory and also would affect the balance of the rope. And then it puts under a feeder where a given amount of material is put into that bucket, about 1/4 ton. At that point, another operative takes the full bucket from under the feeder and waits till the correct positioning of the incoming bucket is in place, allows him then to feed it onto the rope. That spacing is critical because of the way the rope works. It's gravity fed.
The brickworks is downhill from here, so all the power for this ropeway comes from gravity. Put the full buckets of shale on one side going down the hill and the empty buckets on the other side going up, and you don't need an engine house or a motor.
I was wondering, I'm like, all right, so my guess at first was gravity driven, but then I'm seeing it, and it's just like a chairlift at a ski resort, ski mountain, ski place. It's like a ski lift, chairlift. But oh my God, does it work in the same way? Because you're on the chairlift going, no, because you're on a chairlift, you're on it going up and you're off it going down. But, so yeah, so the ones going down have the weight in it and the ones going up down. Okay, that's awesome. I always wondered in chairlifts and like this, there's the ski lifts, they always slow down when they get to the bottom and the top, but they don't slow down in the middle when they're going down empty or when they're going up with people in it. And I'm like, how am I slowing down without them slowing down if we're attached to the same cable, you know? I think he's sort of
on the hill and the empty buckets on the other side going up,
right.
And you don't need an engine house or a motor. You just need brakes to regulate the speed. It takes about half an hour for a round trip. There are about 40 buckets. This ropeway will move about 300 tons of shale every day with no need for petrol or electricity. So let's go to the brickworks at the other end and see how it works down there.
As the bucket comes in the other end, an operator is stood waiting for it. It comes off the rope at a given speed onto a bull rail. From that bull rail, the operator walks round. There's a pivot system on the bucket that tips into a hopper. At that point, it then feeds into a dump truck. The operator then puts the bucket back. When the correct spacing is positioned, he pushes the bucket onto the rope. It's an art to swing that bucket and tip it at the right time. They do walk quite a few miles in. That tips into a hopper. At that point, it then feeds into a dump truck. The operator then puts the bucket back. When the correct spacing is positioned, he pushes the bucket onto the rope. It's an art to swing that.
It still doesn't answer my chairlift question, but okay.
When the correct spacing is positioned, he pushes the bucket onto the rope. It's an art to swing that bucket and tip it at the right time. They do walk quite a few miles in a day. This factory was designed to produce around about 42 million bricks annually. There was a 4.4 million investment 4 years ago that increased the productivity up to 50 million. Clafton produces frost-resistant product. It's down to the shale from the quarry. That's a vital key to it.
Good
the temperature
margin.
we fire at and also the durability of the ceramic bond. That means we can sell this product into all extreme weathers. There's nowhere in the UK we can't sell to with our durability of the product at Clafton. Unfortunately, it has to cross the road. It's never been known, certainly in the last 50, 60 years, to come off at that point. but it is a possibility. So we have a steel bridge with big bucket catchers on the side that would prevent that happening. The rope construction.
I would imagine they'd make the side full a little bit stronger than the other, but maybe not.
Is a 25mm steel rope. Very difficult to get contractors these days who are skilled in splicing ropes of that size. We replace the rope every 6 years. It's a very difficult process. Very old. The technology is the 1920s, of course. We did a computer design of a new ropeway many years ago, and unbelievably, the computer matched this design in terms of trestle heights and weights to somebody with a slide rule and a pencil.
There used to be hundreds of these ropeways around Britain in industrial sites, mines and quarries. This is the last one still operating anywhere in the country. It nearly wasn't. The financial crisis in the late 2000s meant that the quarry and brickworks shut down for a few years. But it was kept in working order, and as of right now, it's still transporting rock. But it has an expiry date. 31st of December 2036. Permission for quarrying was going to end in 2018, but the local council planning department granted an extension because the quarry and brickworks are still operating. There's a lot of shale still in the hill up there, and literally no one objected. I checked the planning report, environmental agencies, local residents, everyone was like, yeah, fine, keep it running, that works. Now, in theory, that deadline could be extended again, but the reason they picked 2036 is that by then, the company will more or less have quarried everything they can out of that hill.
Oh, all right.
And one of the conditions of that time extension is that once quarrying is finished, the ropeway has to come down. The planning report does acknowledge that it's unique in the country. It's the only one left in Britain. There is some heritage value in it, but they say not enough to justify saving it for posterity. This isn't like an old railway line where if it's left unmaintained, it'll just slowly, steadily decay. It could be actively dangerous if the ropes and towers start to fall apart, particularly when they run over a road just there. Unless money is constantly spent to keep it in working order, it'll decay into an unsafe blot on the landscape. Which is fair, but I suspect when that final day comes in about 15 years' time, when the last bucket goes down the ropeway, there'll be a few people here to say goodbye to it. And until then, it'll keep moving shale without needing any fuel at all.
And you pay to ride it?
Thank you so much to all the team at Forterra for showing me around. They did ask me to make clear that the ropeway is not a tourist attraction, so if you're in the area and you want to take a couple of pictures from the road, sure, but then for their sake, please keep driving.
How come he gets to... No. What was I going to say? Awesome video, Tom Scott. What was I going to say? That's really annoying.
Without needing any... We have few people here to...
Oh, yeah, that's so cool how it runs just by gravity. That's awesome. All right. No, let's watch another. U.S. president has a bulletproof bunker.
These days, American presidents travel around the country on Air Force One.
I don't know, guys. I like Tom Scott videos. Whatever it is, it's gonna be good.
In the 1940s, there was no Air Force One. Actually, there wasn't even a US Air Force. They were still part of the Army. Franklin D. Roosevelt was the first sitting US president to fly in an airplane back in 1943. But for most of his presidency, he used a very different form of travel. This is the Ferdinand Magellan, officially known as US Car Number 1, 120 tons of armor-plated, bulletproof rail car.
The rail car is the heaviest U.S. rail car ever built. They had to build special trucks just to support the extra weight. The reason it only weighs 285,000 pounds is that was the weight limit for U.S. railroads, bridges, and trestles at that time. So the entire car is not armor-proofed, only where the president is. The car has 5/8 inch thick bulletproof steel through most of the car, up to this point here. You can see where the rivets change from double rivets to single rivets. The regular president is. The car has 5/8 inch thick bulletproof steel through most of the car, up to this point here. You can see where the rivets change from double rivets to single rivets. The regular steel here versus the bulletproof steel here. So there's bulletproofing, there's 12-ply laminated glass, there are 2 escape hatches in the car to get the president out. It was never painted red, white, and blue like Air Force One. It was always painted Pullman green. When they had to park it somewhere, they would hide it with other Pullman rail cars, so it was basically hiding in plain sight.
After Roosevelt's death, President Truman used the Magellan for a while, asking the engineers to get the train up to 80 miles an hour if they could. Before television was a way to reach the masses, Truman...
He must have said 80.
Up to 80 miles an hour if they could. Before television was a way to reach the masses, Truman toured America in this train, campaigning for re-election, traveling tens of thousands of miles between...
I don't think we realize this. Yeah, I'm going on a rant, okay? how much, and I say this about, so the first time ever, and I thought about this during watching a lot of military history videos throughout, and starting World War I, you had, what's it called? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like the instant communication through the wires. You know what I mean, okay? But before instant communication, just so many aspects about our life that it's just, you can't think about the change enough that it had on everything. And that I think that many people throughout history, human history, have, were alive during a time where some invention occurred where they were just like, oh my God, imagine, like, the printing press must have been one, a few others, but instant communication is just, it's such a game changer. Okay. It just,
tiny stations known as whistle stops, and making up to 8 speeches a day. And it worked. The famous moment where he held up the newspaper that wrongly announced his defeat, that was just there on the back of this tray.
Now, in 1928, air conditioning was accomplished by ice. There are ice bunkers in the car. Blocks of ice were put in there, and ceiling fans across the whole car would then blow the cold air as it dropped down. So now we're heading into the armored part of the car where the president stayed.
Insulation.
Here we have the dining room. All the rooms in the car had a phone in them. When the car was underway, the phones were hooked up to a radio car called the General Meyer. When they were in stations, they were hot wired into the phones in the station. This is the desk the president would use. He could sign papers. This is what the windows look like. This is 12-ply laminated glass.
Oh my God. I thought those were several panes, several window. That's one window?
About 3 inches thick. So all the windows from this point to the rear of the car are sealed. You cannot take them out, which is why they have air conditioning. Stateroom C here, this is the president's quarters. The president has a fixed bed, giving him a little bit of extra leg room. That is what a commode chair looks like. The back folds down as a sink, and the seat folds up to be a toilet underneath. The wheelchair was built specifically for Roosevelt's use in this car, so you could get up and down the narrow hallway. Here we have the presidential bathroom, and the first of the 2 escape hatches are here. What would have been a window has been converted to a steel plate that they could push out, and they could get the president out that way if they needed to. What looks like a soap dish hanging by the door here is actually a cigar holder. Roosevelt would sit in there and smoke cigars. Here we have the observation lounge of the car, a cigar holder. Roosevelt would sit in there and
Porter's call bell.
smoke cigars. Here we have the observation lounge of the car. This is where presidents would sit in the back of the car and watch the rails pass behind them, entertain the guests that were on the car with them. We also have the second escape hatch, and this was fashioned from a submarine. It was designed if the car was ever knocked over on its side, they could open this door and go out it. This door leads to the rear platform. The door alone weighs 1,500 pounds. That's about half the weight of the car that most people come to visit.
Is it just me, or is this, this was before JFK. Is this a bit overkill for a train that is only going to be in the U.S.? I understand needs protection, but I mean, I feel like even if you have a bunch of guys ready, stationed, planning for the thing with Maxim, those big machine guns, maybe, but it just seems a bit overkill.
Visit our museum in. It was fashioned after a bank vault. Out here is the rear platform. This is where presidents would give their speeches. When Truman ascended to the presidency after Roosevelt died, he pretty much lived in this car for a few months as he went across the campaign's trail, and he made more than 350 whistle-stop speeches from this back platform.
I also want to know what the reason
him to connect
for why old microphones look like this. Just that's like the classic old microphone.
He went across the campaign's trail, and he made more than 350 whistle-stop speeches from this back platform. That's what allowed him to connect with the American people.
Of course, air travel became easier and cheaper and safer, and eventually the Ferdinand Magellan fell out of use. Nowadays it's a museum piece, but in an era where the Trump train is just a metaphor, it's interesting to note that there were other presidents whose train was a little more real.
America as a country, except for certain parts of the country, doesn't embrace rails the way that we used to. This piece is historic, it is unique, it is harkening back to a simpler place and time and a simpler pace.
I would love to see like a kitchen area.
Unique, it is harkening back to a simpler place and time and a simpler pace of life. And that's what I wish we could kind of get a little piece of that back. Still keep our cell phones. I'm not giving that up.
Thank you to everyone at the Gold Coast Railway Museum. Pull down the description for more about them and about the Ferdinand Magellan. Don't worry, this isn't some...
I won't do this if there's a super long one. Maybe if there's a really short one. I don't want to extend it too long. No. No. Later. No, one more.
This is Giant Mine in the Northwest Territories of Canada. There are kilometres of tunnels under this rock and chambers the size of city blocks that have been hollowed out. In the 20th century, more than 200,000 tonnes of gold were extracted from the rock underneath here. At current prices, that is somewhere north of $8 billion worth of gold.
For a second, I wanted to pause it and go like, do the math, like how much that's worth, and then I would have just wasted all that time when he just said it.
Underneath here. At current prices, that is somewhere north of $8 billion worth of gold. There is a problem though. That mining also created more than 200,000 tonnes of toxic arsenic trioxide dust. That's enough to kill everyone on Earth several times over. Over the decades, the vast majority of it was stored in the empty, abandoned chambers left behind after mining, although some of it did get out into the environment. The mine closed in 2004. When the gold ran out, the mining company went bankrupt and left the mess for the government to clean up. Arsenic trioxide has no scent, no taste, and it dissolves in water. Oh, and we're right next to Yellowknife, the capital of the Northwest Territories, and next to the 10th largest lake in the world.
There's 200...
Yellowknife, that's way up there in Canada, I think.
37,000 tons of arsenic trioxide, and they're currently stored in 14 underground chambers. The plan is to freeze the chambers. We're freezing the rock around the arsenic. The arsenic trioxide is a fine powder, so it will form a shell, and eventually it will freeze in, and it will become a block over time.
Didn't it say something about water? Won't the ice melt? I don't know. Look, I'm trying to like... Actually, the arsenic, I don't know what I'm talking about. These people do.
And that prevents water from getting in and getting out and keeps the arsenic trioxide contained. So each chamber, of course, is differently shaped. Some are irregular shapes, some are very rectangular shapes. So we want to freeze 10 meters beyond all boundaries of the chambers, both on the horizontal and the vertical. We're going to freeze at least to -5 degrees Celsius. The way we're going to freeze it, we're going to use a...
Let me convert. That's -5 degrees Celsius. That is... -9 plus 32, which is 23. That's 23 degrees positive Fahrenheit, right?
Freeze at least to -5 degrees Celsius. The way we're going to freeze it, we're going to use a technology called thermosiphon technology, and it's basically a technology that uses the ambient air temperature, the cold air, using a long tube filled with carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide, when it's a gas, it rises up to the top of the tube, and then if the air outside is colder, it will dissipate its heat, turn to a liquid, and the gravity will drop back down to the bottom of the tube. And there it can warm up, take the heat out of the ground, and it just continually cycles extracting heat from the ground. Since we're in Yellowknife, north of 60 degrees latitude, it's colder above ground.
I love engineers, man. It's just, it's just something I know I could not do. I am not smart enough to do this stuff, and because of that, I just have so much appreciation for engineers, especially like really high educated major project engineers.
That it is below ground for the majority of the year.
Freezing the arsenic doesn't make it less toxic, but it does make it impossible for any water to seep in and then carry the arsenic out. And that was the mining company's original solution, using the natural permafrost here. And it might have worked if they hadn't mined the rock above it, exposed the permafrost layer to the elements, and started to melt it.
That's what I was saying. Hey, I am kind of smart. That's what...
But there are skeptics, and they do have a point. Freezing requires constant upkeep. This dust is arguably worse than radioactive waste. There is no half-life here. It won't decay over time. The dust will be just as deadly in 10,000, 100,000, or a million years.
So right now, there's nothing on the horizon. The freezing was deemed the best technology for the arsenic trioxide, so we will be funding research indefinitely until a different solution arises. We have frozen.
What if you just like fill it with a molten metal, or like put it in a bunch of like super deep cavern where the smoke from the arsenic after it's burned, it can't get out, and just like fill it with like concrete, and then, or just fill it with like molten lead or like molten steel, iron, and then concrete, and then clearly there are smarter minds thinking of this, and there's a reason that's not the case. All right, guys, hope you're all doing well. See you guys next time. Hope you learned something or can teach me something. Keep recommending. Love to have you on the Discord, or just see me in the comments, or just watching with me. Appreciate it. Bye, guys.